All right, so you know those apartments everyone's talking about over in Gangdong-gu,
Yeah.
Riverpark?
Yeah, I've seen the ads. They look pretty swanky.
Oh, yeah. High-end is putting it mildly. But someone sent us this investigative report, and get this. They're selling for like $2.5 billion. You'd think that'd buy you perfection, right?
Well, yeah, you'd assume so. What's the catch?
Over 160 defects before anyone even moved in.
Seriously. 160.
That's what this Korea Building Safety Diagnostics report says. Cracks, leaks, you name it, it's a mess.
And they're still trying to sell these as luxury apartments.
Well, that's what we're going to unpack today. What does this tell us about the whole high-end market? I mean, if this is happening at Riverpark, what should buyers be watching out for elsewhere?
It's a great question. I'm curious to dive in.
We'll break it all down. The construction problems, the parking nightmare the residents are dealing with, how the developers are responding or not, what the local government's saying, and what the experts think about the bigger picture.
Sounds like a lot to cover.
Oh, it is. This report is packed. But first, let's really get into these construction defects. 160 is a crazy number for a brand new building, especially at this price point.
Agreed. And it's not like we're talking about a few scuff marks here and there. The report details some pretty serious stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look at these pictures. Peeling wall panels, tiles that are all uneven. Imagine walking into your brand new, super expensive apartment and seeing that.
Not exactly the luxurious first impression you'd expect.
Right. And it's not just cosmetic either. There's missing caulking, electrical outlets that look like they were installed by a 5-year-old, even signs of water damage.
Water damage. Already, that's not a good sign at all.
Not to mention missing electrical components and gaps in the kitchen cabinets. This isn't just sloppy work. I feel like they cut corners on the whole construction process.
Definitely concerning. And it makes you wonder what else they might have overlooked.
Now, the report did mention that some industry people say finding like 50 to 200 defects isn't unheard of during a new building inspection.
Okay, but that's an average, right? There's a big difference between finding a handful of minor issues and over 160.
Exactly. And nationally, the average is only about 7.8 defects per household. So 160 is way, way above that. Plus, you're paying a premium for that high-end experience the second you step onto the property.
It's the whole package. You're not just buying an apartment, you're buying into a certain lifestyle.
Right. And the residents are furious. One even said the finishing in some areas is worse than public rental housing.
Ouch. That's gotta sting.
Dl이앤씨, the construction company, says they'll fix everything before anyone moves in. They're calling them minor defects.
Minor? 160 defects? That doesn't sound minor to me.
It's the classic developer response. But at this scale and in a development that's supposed to be top tier, it just feels like a massive quality control failure.
It really undermines the whole idea of exclusivity and luxury that they're selling.
Totally. So construction is one issue. But the residents are also up in arms about parking.
Oh, parking. What's going on there?
They're only getting one space per unit.
One. For a luxury development. That's pretty unusual.
You'd think so, right? Especially for people who can afford these apartments, they're probably used to having multiple cars.
Makes sense. So what's the developer's excuse?
DH Property One, the developer, initially claimed that mixed-use buildings in Seoul can only have one parking space per unit.
I see. Trying to blame it on regulations.
But the report says that's just plain wrong. Seoul City rules don't say that at all.
So they're either misinformed or being deliberately misleading. Neither option looks good for them.
Nope. And it gets worse. When you compare Riverpark to other high-end developments, the difference is stark. Complexes like Farina Hang and 91 Hang, they offer 3 to 4 parking spaces per unit.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
And here's the kicker. Those other developments actually have lower floor area ratios and building coverage ratios than Riverpark, meaning they're less dense, yet they still manage to provide way more parking.
So Riverpark is crammed with apartments, but they skimped on the parking.
That's what it looks like. And the residents are convinced they're getting a raw deal. They're saying that a bunch of parking spaces have been allocated to the public and commercial facilities within the complex.
And how many are we talking?
7 extra for public use, and possibly up to 10 for commercial tenants. The residents are feeling like they're losing out on shared space that they should have access to.
I can understand their frustration.
Yeah.
In a private high-end development, you expect the amenities to be primarily for the residents.
Exactly. And they're not taking it lying down. They're looking to change the management rules through their residents association.
Trying to get it fixed internally. Makes sense.
But they're also considering legal action, like charging high fees for public parking or even trying to reclaim the land rights associated with those spaces.
Wow, they're not messing around.
It seems like they've reached their breaking point. Meanwhile, Dhproperty1 says they're actively discussing solutions with Gangdong-gu, the local government.
Discussing, huh? But have they actually done anything concrete?
That's unclear. The residents certainly don't seem to think so.
What about the local government? What's their take on all this?
Well, Gangdong-gu says the parking provision meets the legal minimum. They admit some residents might feel a shortage because of how the spaces are allocated, but they don't see it as a violation of regulations.
So basically, they're washing their hands of it.
Pretty much, which isn't going to sit well with the residents who are already dealing with all these construction defects.
It's a tough spot for them. They paid top dollar for a luxury experience, and they're getting anything but.
And they feel like they're not being heard. The Residents Committee says the developers haven't provided a clear plan or a formal response, and they're ignoring their official letters.
That's a terrible way to treat your customers, especially when they've invested so much.
It really erodes trust and damages the developer's reputation.
And that's exactly what one real estate expert highlighted in the report. They said that when a high-end development fails to deliver on basic things like construction quality and amenities, it can really hurt the developer's brand image.
Absolutely. People start to wonder if all their projects are going to have the same problems.
And this expert also pointed out that the combination of dense construction, limited parking, and recurring quality issues can really make buyers wary.
Right. They start to question if the developers are prioritizing profits over quality.
And it seems like this might not be an isolated incident for Dl이앤씨. The report mentioned they had similar problems with another development, Acrobestinho in Anyang.
Oh, yeah. That one got a lot of bad press for being overpriced. And they had a ton of unsold units.
So this could be a pattern of behavior.
Which raises even bigger questions about the high-end market as a whole.
Like, are buyers getting what they're paying for? And what kind of protections do they have?
It's a serious issue. So, to recap, Grantsriverpark is a mess. Construction defects, parking problems, frustrated residents, and developers who seem to be dragging their feet.
It's a classic case of over-promising and under-delivering.
And it really highlights the gap between what high-end is supposed to mean and what buyers are actually getting.
Especially when you consider how much money is involved. It makes you wonder if this is a sign of things to come in the luxury housing market.
Are we going to see more of this? More developers cutting corners to maximize profits?
It's certainly a possibility. And if that's the case, buyers need to be extra cautious.
Absolutely. Do your research, ask tough questions, and don't just take the developer's word for it.
This whole situation at Grantsriverpark is a cautionary tale.
It really is. And it makes you think, what does this mean for the future of quality control and consumer protection in the high-end market? Is this just a blip, or are we looking at a much bigger problem?
It's something we all need to be paying attention to.
Absolutely. And for our listeners out there, this is something to consider, even if you're not in the market for a multi-billion-won apartment. This case could have ripple effects on the entire housing market.
It's a reminder that even in the luxury segment, things aren't always what they seem.
Do your homework, and don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. You deserve to get what you pay for.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today, but this is definitely a conversation worth continuing. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
Until then.